As it is known, the tank is a tracked and armored combat vehicle whose main task is to attack enemy forces with the use of direct firepower. The features that distinguish the tank from other combat vehicles are its heavy armor, high firepower and driving gear designed to go fast on any terrain. Although costly and logistically demanding, it is an indispensable combat tool in modern armies due to its ability to attack ground targets and undermine the morale of infantry soldiers. Here is the invention and the history of the tank from past to present. Dear viewers, don't forget to subscribe to be informed about the new information. Since ancient times, people have constantly strived to find destructive means of warfare that will strike and spread terror. The various results of these can be seen in the ancient Chinese, Assyrians, Egyptians, Romans, albeit according to the simple technologies of their times, in the form of light two-wheeled chariots, closed chariots, armored knights and heavy cavalry of the Middle Ages. Apart from these, it is known that the elephants of Hannibal and Timur were used in wars like today's tanks in ancient times. The famous great artist of Renaissance Italy, Leonardo da Vinci, was able to present a sketch of the modern tank and armored vehicle with his superior imagination and successful drawings and explain their use in wars as follows: I make closed, safe and highly destructive chariots. When they advance by firing their cannons, even the strongest enemy ranks will have to dissolve and retreat. After these, our own infantry will be able to advance safely and without resistance. Over the centuries many armies have tried to make surefire weapons like Leonardo da Vinci. But there were no tanks in the armies until the First World War began in 1914. In September 1915, the first tank was tested in Wembley Park and the experience was positive. Now it was necessary to come up with a name for this vehicle. Although different names were offered by many people, the name tank, which was the most appropriate in terms of confidentiality, was deemed appropriate for the vehicle, and was first used in tank factories in England. The first tank training ground was established in the Seabury camp area in Bisley. The crew was chosen from among the army units and volunteers. When the first tank produced was brought to the Mark I training center, many of the volunteers saw the vehicle and refused to move to this class. The volunteers doubted that this misshapen piece of iron would even walk. With the introduction of the tank, it began to be established in the first organization and this class was called motor machine gun. Since July 27, 1917, the name of this class was tank, and thus the foundation of today's tank class was laid. At the end of 1917, the Whiffet tank, a series of medium tanks, entered service in England. The weight of the tank was 14 to 20 tons and its range was 100 kilometers. Serial production of the Renault FT light tanks began in France in 1918. French and American forces were immediately equipped with these tanks. These tanks, which later spread to many countries, became the basis of armored weapons in the period between the two world wars. In 1918, preparations for the offensive led to the emergence of heavy tanks. Its French prototype, the FCMI-8 tank, weighed 42 tons and was armed with a 105 mm gun. Especially the FCM-2C tank weighed 68 tons and was strong enough to pass through the northern channels of France. The 35-ton Mark V tank, carrying two 57 mm guns, was manufactured in England in 1918 and remained in service until 1930. During the 15 years following the Peace of 1919, successful tank models were made in many countries, but mass production was not started due to the abundance of war stocks. While France was inspecting a tank carrying a 155 mm gun under the turret, Britain released the first amphibious tank in 1921. The USA produced the original first tank, the Christie, in 1931. This tank weighed 13 tons and moved on wheels or tracks. The D1 tank, 47 mm gun, weight 13 tons, speed 18 km per hour, produced in France on the same date as the last of the tanks from the First World War. However, this model also underwent a change and added a walkie-talkie. Indeed, many light tanks made in 1933 show a new trend. Equipped with a heavy machine gun and armored with 10 to 12 mm thickness, these new tanks weighing 3.5 tons had a speed of 40 to 60 km per hour. Among these, we can count Fiat Ansaldo, British Vickers and French Renault tanks. With the general armament again in 1936, new tanks appeared at the beginning of the Second World War. The improvements made in the engines in these tanks allowed to exceed 10 horsepower per ton. Optical instruments have been made more sensitive. The walkie-talkie installed in almost all tanks replaced the pennant system used until that time. However, the purpose of the construction of these tanks was to reconcile the factors of power, speed and weight, and these tanks were of a trial nature. Among these tanks are the 10-ton light tanks Renault R35, R40, Hotchkiss H35, H39, FCM36. In Germany, on the other hand, very light tanks were built first. They were armed only with heavy machine guns. However, after the lessons learned in the Spanish Civil War, he started the production of heavier and better armored tanks. The American M3 and M5 tanks with 37 mm guns were the best light tanks in the second half of the Second World War. Their strength, and therefore their weight, has increased significantly. The German armed forces used the Panther and later the Tiger tanks. Russia, on the other hand, owes its success to the T-34 tank. The T-34 tank was suitable for the field, and had wide tracks that were very suitable for movement on soft soil. In 1944, the heavily armored and extremely slow-velocity Stalin tank appeared, equipped with a 122 mm cannon. Initially unequipped, the United States first took advantage of the Grand tanks, which were a poor copy of the French B tank. Then he succeeded in serial production of Sherman tanks. This tank later spread to all Allied armies. Together with the French FT and Russian T-34 tanks, they are one of the most successful in tank history. In this period, England, besides the 26-ton Matilda, 16-ton Valentine and Churchill tanks, it used different types of cruiser tanks, equipped with a fast 47 mm gun. After the Second World War, armies were equipped with tanks of approximately 50 tons. Stalin tanks in Russia, Patton tanks in the USA and Western countries, Centurion and Conqueror tanks in England. They are equipped with 80 to 112 mm diameter guns in the turret and most have rangefinder and anti-aircraft guns. In the same years, the German army was equipped with 40-ton tanks, a variant of the Panther. After 1945, the tank's value became a matter of debate when two weapons, such as guided missiles and cavities, were the tank's mortal enemies. But the discovery of nuclear weapons reaffirmed the tank's true value. Indeed, the tanks not only provide protection from blast winds, heat and radiation, but also can quickly move away from the radioactive polluted area, even through the overturned terrain, thanks to their pallets. The tank, which has been on the battlefield in 1916 with an increasing performance and capacity since the first day it was used, has been the decision weapon of the Second World War, and later local wars and is at the center of the concept of armored units, especially in terms of its effectiveness against the anti-tank weapons developed in the 1970s. Although it has started to be discussed, the preferences dominated the tank, thanks to its distinctive and superior features such as mobile firepower, impact effect, and survivability, and it was the first tank that came to mind when armored units were mentioned. Despite all efforts to deteriorate the superiority in favor of the tank in terms of survivability against the anti-tank weapons, and other weapons used against it, this superiority has not deteriorated, and no weapon has been able to have the capabilities of the tank, and its privilege among its weapon systems. Today, the rapid and sudden developments in the world geopolitics as a result of the disintegration of the Pax, and the change of balances have increased the possibility of regional crisis and conflict, and the regained independence has led to ethnic or religious conflicts. The peace and security needs, which could not be sustained due to these turmoils, and conflicts arising from various reasons, show that tanks will continue to be the weapon of choice in the future, in terms of their characteristics. For nearly 100 years, tanks and armor tactics have undergone many developments. It is considered that it would be appropriate to examine the expected developments in tanks under the headings of firepower, survivability, command control and mobility, which are also the basis of it. Dear viewers, these are the information we have prepared about the invention and the history of the tank. And, don't forget to subscribe to be informed about the new information. Thanks for watching. See you in another video.